I was so used to being there for everybody else and never having anybody there for me. And part of that was because I didn't even know how to express that I needed anybody else to be there. Or shit, maybe I didn't notice that I needed anybody else to be there. Everyone around me was so used to me taking care of everything and everybody that they didn't even notice I wasn't taking care of myself. You know, between being a mother and being a wife, I had really lost myself. And it took a long time before I was able to find my happiness. And nowadays, it don't matter what I lose, as long as I never lose me again. There was times when I felt like I had nothing left to give. I had been so busy pouring into everybody else's cup while mine was completely empty. But it's almost like when you're in that mode, you don't really notice how much you're actually neglecting yourself until you reach that breaking point. And you are now tuned in to Queen's Podcast, Against All Odds, where no topic is off limits, truth has no filter, and my pain became my power. Being quiet never saved me. I'm just here to share my experience, because those reality checks were hard, but I became the storm that they couldn't withstand, and rising above it is rare. I'm your host, Queen C, and around here, we don't sugarcoat. We turn our stories into strength and figure this shit out. Welcome back to Queen C's Against All Odds podcast. Episode 6 is going to be about healing. You know, a lot of people, they don't talk about how dark and lonely the journey can be when you're starting over and trying to find yourself. It's almost like they want to disappear and come back when they're better. And nobody wants to be vulnerable to tell you how dark that road was. But one thing that I've come to notice about life is it's a lot easier to navigate when you can somewhat expect how it's going to be. And I hope my experiences can help another woman out there who might be going through the same thing. But before we unpack the baggage, let me just tell you guys, this podcast is only able to happen because of Confidence Cosmetics, which is my skincare brand that I've built from the ground up. No harsh chemicals, no alcohol-based ingredients, no perfume-based ingredients. So that means it's safe for all skin types, all ages, all ethnicities. And this is what I use every morning and every night. And once I started to take my skincare routine serious and see the effectiveness of it and get that natural glow, I started to feel a lot better about myself. Because the sexiest thing a woman wears is her confidence, and self-care is self-love. So I want you guys to make sure you check out all of my products. I'm going to link them below in this video, and I'm offering a special discount to all of my viewers. Anyone who purchases today will get 15% off their entire purchase. All you have to do is enter coupon code episode 6. Not only will you be supporting the podcast, but you'll be getting top tier products. So start taking that skincare routine serious. And like I said, check out all of the products. I'm going to link them below in this video and get yours today. So if you watched episode 4, I told you guys during that episode that I was planning on having a guest. And the person that I was intending to have was a staff member that I met in juvenile hall when I was a kid, about 13, 14 years old. And she ended up becoming like family to me. This is someone still to this day that is one of the closest people in my life. My trust is about this big. So I'm very guarded about who I let in. But when I tell you, this is one of the few people that I trust with my life. She knows damn near everything about me, and any issue that I've pretty much ever had throughout my life that I've been uncomfortable to talk about with anybody else, I've always went straight to her. And, you know, when I reached out to her, I told her, you know, I want you to be on the podcast. And she was like, I was already expecting that. And she was with it. She was ready to come. And, you know, because she still works in juvenile hall, she was like, well, I got to get clearance, but I don't see it being an issue. I haven't been in juvenile hall in over 20 some years, so I didn't see a problem with it either. So I went and announced it to you guys. Well, come to find out, they told her no, that she could not be on the podcast. And they started naming just a bunch of ethics and, you know, a bunch of bullshit. Let's just put it that way. They started talking about a bunch of bullshit. And to be honest, I can't help but to feel like they don't want me to talk about some of the things that they know I know. And that shit really rubbed me the wrong way. I really wanted you guys to have the opportunity to see things from the outside in. She was able to watch my life in real time and witness a lot of the things that I had to deal with. And I couldn't understand why they would have a problem with that until I realized my voice has reach. Her and I were just talking about some of my videos and how they go viral, and a lot of people talk about them and this and that. And I was like, what are they worried about? If you had done no wrong, what would you be worried about me speaking for? Why would you not want somebody to come on here? This is a positive movement. I'm shedding light on things that could potentially help. They could help others. They could give insight. There could be so many positive things that come from this podcast, but instead, you guys would rather me be quiet. And what's funny about that is I got a big ass mouth still to this day. And some of the things that I could bring up, I wasn't intending to. What's really sad to me is some of these staff that work at juvenile hall, the ones that genuinely want to help the youth, they have the ability to really make a positive impact in some of our lives. And I'm speaking from a place of being that kid. I want you guys to understand how we view it on our end growing up in the system. When you're somebody who comes in and out of juvenile hall, you already come pretty much from a background, and this is pretty general for most of the kids that are in and out of juvenile hall. You already come from a background of a place where you can't trust a lot of people. So as you start to continue to see these familiar faces, and keep in mind, when you're there, they're mentoring you, they're counseling you, they're talking to you, they're really providing that structure. So you start to form these bonds with them and have these relationships to where you start to trust them, and even sometimes open up to them about things in your childhood that are beyond what's in that file. And they may give you advice. They may, they're just there to support you in a positive light. And it's almost like when you turn 18, the probation department or the people above them expect those staff to throw you away as if you're trash. Cut the communication, no longer be your support system. They should no longer, have pretty much any dealings with you because you're of age technically. Although when you turn 18, you're still very much not mentally mature enough to really understand life. And I don't think that anyone takes the time to really sit back and wonder what that can do to someone who has gained that trust for you. Like, if I open up to you and I share all these things, and you've been the one that I go to when I have a problem, and I'm talking to you about certain things, and then all of a sudden, just because I'm 18, you start acting funny or you're distant, that could have a negative impact, because now I'm looking at it like everything was fake. You don't give a fuck about me, but that's what they expect. And it's really a trip. I'm gonna share a story with you guys, because it really bothered me with this situation. When they told the staff that she couldn't come on my podcast, I was sitting up there and I was like, damn, my platform is really positive. I feel like it's giving you guys the insight to understand the ins and outs of the juvenile justice system, and just helping you guys to understand how people are, why they do some of the things they do, and why we are the way that we are. And my son had got into some trouble a while back, and he ended up being in the same juvenile hall that I grew up in. And he ended up having to be there for about 12 months in custody. He's telling me one day, he's like, there's this staff, she's messing with one of the dudes. And I'm like, what? And he was like, yeah, that's really his girl. He be talking to her on the phone, everything. And I was like, oh, that don't surprise me. It happens. But anyways, I can't say this woman's name because I'm not going to put myself at risk to get sued for defamation or anything, but I will say this. She was the daughter of a Vallejo police officer. Now, to any of my viewers out there, when you guys have time, I just want you to Google Vallejo Police Department and you'll see all the corruption, because it's really, really sick, but a lot of people don't know about it. Anyhow, this woman was the daughter of a Vallejo police officer, and she was not qualified to be working with the youth. But, because of her connections, she was able to get the position there at juvenile hall. So she starts messing with one of these boys. Now, one thing about juvenile hall, rumors spread. And if there's something going on and one person tells one person, that shit will spread like wildflowers. So my son's telling me all about it. And he's like, yeah, he be talking to her on the phone. She be bringing him shit. It's like, it was a lot. So needless to say, some months down the line, I guess other staff members started to hear about it. This woman gets put under investigation, and they are able to pull that boy's phone records. Now, at the time, it was right around the time that COVID hit, and they were giving the kids phone cards so that way they could call their families for free. And I guess you could pull the calls and see the calls from the phone records. Anyways, while they're doing the investigation, they pull this boy's phone records only to see that all of his calls were to her personal cell phone, the same phone number that she put on her employee records when she applied. Keep in mind, all of this is taking place while my child is locked up in this same county around this same staff. And according to him, it was a whole lot more than just phone calls going on. And they heard about it. Everybody in that facility heard about it. So they conduct their fake ass investigation. And clearly something inappropriate is going on, because there's no excuse in the world why this young ass boy who's a minor should be talking to this grown ass woman on her personal cell phone from their juvenile hall phone. And you mean to tell me she's not prevented from working with other children in the future? That shit boiled down to the color of her skin and the fact that she was the daughter of a Vallejo police officer. And that's all it boiled down to. Nothing else. But you prevent a staff member who worked with me over 20 plus years ago to come on my podcast and talk about my life. And then you use words like code of ethics. Code of ethics where? Since when has that department gave a fuck about code of ethics? Because you know what I remember? I was in juvenile hall and there was a staff that had been there for a very long time. And there was a boy in there fighting his case, and she was messing with that boy. He turned 18 and was transferred to the county jail. Do you know that woman went and married him? Ask me what happened to that woman. I'll wait, because it wasn't a damn thing. She didn't get fired. She didn't get suspended. Nothing. You know what they made her do? They made her get an annulment. And like I said, everybody knew about it. Staff, kids. I was in there and heard about it, because that's how that shit is. It spreads like a damn soap opera in there. Nothing happened. And what do you think? You think she just started messing with him when she married him? When he turned 18? No, she had been messing with him, and they knew that. But they want to use code of ethics? Code of ethics, my motherfucking ass. And that's what really pisses me off about the situation, because it's like, how do you want to prevent someone from coming and speaking on my podcast, which is a very positive platform, and someone who had a real positive impact on my life, but you're willing to cover up all this other shit, and then you have the nerve and the audacity to say and use words like code of ethics? How? Where? But it's one of those things where I'm going to take it like it is what it is. But one thing for sure, and two things for certain, you can't silence me. And standing in my way is only going to make me scream even louder. But you know what I've come to notice? When you have a voice and you start to advocate for others who are going through things that you've already been through, and you start to spread awareness, there are either going to be people that embrace you and really value you and understand the importance, or others are going to shy away from you and stay away and want you to be quiet. And that's what happened in this situation. I was contacted a couple years ago from the Mike Tyson camp. They have the Tyson Foundation, and then his mother-in-law, which is Dr. Rita Ali, has the We Too Matter organization. And when they reached out to me, she told me that she was really impressed with my movement and the fact that I was able to provide resources to people that were formerly incarcerated. And she asked me to come do a workshop for one of their programs and events that they were having. It was a really big opportunity for me to be able to give back. And it ended up being a really good turnout. And eventually she made me a board member. And we just did another event. It was on Wednesday. And when I tell you, it was so fulfilling. Like, they had a bunch of great people on the panel that spoke. All of them had like PhDs, and it was just different psychologists and things like that. But when it was my turn to get up and speak to these women, I let them know I don't have any fancy degrees. I just have a whole bunch of life experiences that I had to work through, and I had to figure out how to navigate through these problems. And I spoke to them as if I was one of them, because I am. I've been right where they're at, and it doesn't matter how many times you have to pick up the pieces and start over. It doesn't matter what past you come from. It doesn't matter what obstacles you've had to face. You're here now, and you can start now and start to get, where you want to be. And with people that, you're surrounded by at these events, use them as your stepping stone. And it was just really, really good to be able to give that to them. For me, was the fact that I had all of these other people, like I said, with PhDs, and you got psychologists, and I had all of them congratulating me and really seeing the value in the message that I was given, and thanking me for being that. And that meant a lot, but it showed me it don't matter how many doors close on you. When that one door opens, sometimes that's the only door that you need to walk through. Now let's talk about this healing journey that a lot of people will not admit. It gets dark and very lonely while you're on this road trying to find yourself or find your happiness. Now, one thing I do want to say is I am by far a perfect person. I tell you guys that all the time. It doesn't matter how many videos of good advice that I give or how many motivational speeches that I do. I am not perfect. I am no better than the next woman that's watching this podcast right now. The only difference between me and someone else who may be going through it at this current time is I've already been there. I've already faced those obstacles. So I'm able to just give advice from what I did or mistakes that I made. I may not have handled certain things the right way, how I should have. And now that I've got past it, I'm able to look back and understand my mistakes, and that could help another woman out. But, one thing about my past and my childhood and growing up in the system is it damaged me. It damaged me in a lot of ways that I wasn't even able to identify until I got real older and a lot more mature. And then I looked back and I realized that even in my parenting, there were certain things that I should have did differently. And maybe now that I am to a point where I understand a lot more, I can help prevent that in another woman's life, in another mother's life. One of my flaws is that I'm not an affectionate person. Even though in my mind I want to be and I try to be, I'm just not an affectionate person. So the way that I expressed my love was to make sure that everybody around me was straight. And I mean, not having to worry about anything, the basics in life. If somebody had a problem, I was rushing to try to fix that problem. I made everybody else's problems my problems. If I loved you, whatever you were going through, I was going to try to solve that problem for you, because that's the way that I said I love you. Now, the downside to that is while I was busy working to make everybody else happy, I wasn't happy. And I was only masking my own trauma by making sure that everybody else had a smile on their face. And it wasn't until after my divorce when I really started doing some soul searching. I've shared this before on my TikTok page, but I was the one that initiated my divorce. And yet and still, I was very, very sad afterwards. Not because I felt like I had, made the wrong decision, but because I felt like I had put so much time into something that failed. And when you love somebody so much, you wonder, why couldn't this work? You blame the other person, and you look at it like, why didn't you love me enough to make it work? When ultimately you have to own some of that responsibility. I know I had to. I had to understand that, I wasn't happy inside, but I had no answer as to what it was that I was actually looking for, or that, would satisfy me enough to bring me to that real peaceful state. And I got to a point in life where I started to like just try to dig a lot more deeper, and figure out what is the root of the problem. What is it that what caused me to even be in certain situations for so long when I wasn't happy? And it took me back to my childhood, and I started to realize that I always wanted stability. I told you guys that in the first and second episode. I had kids really young because I came from that broken home, and I wanted to fix that. I wanted opposite of that. So it led me to stay in situations that I should have been walked away from. And then once I really realized that a lot of my unhappiness came from deep rooted issues from my childhood, I was able to identify them and start working on them. But nobody tells you how hard it is to rewire your brain after being a certain way for so long, and trying to go back and fix that to even allow changes within yourself to be made, so that way you can start working on it. So you can get to that space where you are satisfied, or you are pursuing the things that you want to pursue. They don't tell you how hard that is. And that was one of my biggest obstacles. After you go through traumatic experiences like heartache and pain, you start to develop these defense mechanisms. And some people can do that in a healthy way, and others can do that in a negative way. And one of my defense mechanisms was to isolate myself and withdraw. And I had a lot of displacement, placing my anger onto the wrong people, blaming people. I just really had some negative defense mechanisms. And one thing that I had to learn how to do in a healthy way is channel that anger, channel that pain, and tell myself that it was okay to cry. It was okay to start over. But part of my isolation led me to depression, because I just felt very alone, which was crazy because I wanted to be alone. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to express what I was going through. I just needed to distance myself from everybody. And now that I'm learning a lot more about it, I realized it's unhealthy to do it that way. I'm not saying that you have to go out there and just, talk to everybody with an ear or wear your heart on your sleeve, but you have to figure out a way to get it out. I don't care if it's journaling. I don't care if it's, going places that you've never been, that may have other people that are, going through the same thing. But you have to find a way to connect with the outside world, something outside of what you're used to, your immediate circle. Some people don't like to share, that trauma with people that know them. They have a fear of judgment, or just not wanting to show how hurt they are. And once I was able to get to a space where I was like, okay, this is what it is. This is life. Deal with it. That's when I was able to start properly channeling, what I was going through, and actually processing that these are the phases: good, bad, ugly. And Most of them along the way are going to be very, very ugly. I went on this journey to like reinvent myself, and it caused me to do a lot of self reflecting, which brought a lot of tears. And I had realized that, a lot of the things that I had been through, I repressed. I buried them so deep that they would come out in different ways throughout my life. And my way of showing that I was really hurt was to hurt people back. You hurt my feelings, I'm going to hurt you worse. You do something to me, I'm going to get you back worse. I never wanted anyone to feel like they had a one up on me at all. Smallest things to the biggest things. It was always like, all right, I got you. How dare you? But watch this. And that never fixed the problem. That never helped in any kind of way. All it did was make it worse. I would get that moment of gratification like, told you I would get you back. But it wasn't long term. It wasn't anything that made me feel better in the long run. And while I was on this journey to, recreate myself and just find my happiness, I started learning more about myself. You know, what really makes me smile, what brings me joy inside, what makes me feel whole. And I don't know why, but a big part of that was me helping other women and being that voice for people who couldn't find theirs. And then in terms of my love life, I wanted something totally opposite. I didn't want I didn't want to be the one in control anymore. I wanted to be the one that was loved. And not saying I didn't feel loved before, but I wanted to take the passenger seat. I didn't want to make the plans. I didn't want to make sure that everything in that household was taken care of. I no longer wanted to be the person in charge. And that was a role I always played. Not saying financially, but just overall making the decisions. I didn't want to do that anymore. I wanted to sit back and be with someone that said, I got you. And they not just said it, but they showed it. That's what I was looking for. I didn't want to be the one that figured out how to solve everybody else's problems. I wanted to be the one that could run to somebody else when I had a problem and not have to think about it, you know, just feel secure with the person that I was with to know that they would make the right choice. And I could just kick my feet up and finally relax. And you get to this place where you start being at peace with exactly what it is, with different roles that people play in your life, whether it's friendships, relationships. You make peace in knowing that you're not over expecting anything from anybody. You want them to show you exactly who they are. And then you determine how you're going to deal with them. And it's like you no longer feel the need to convince anybody to do the right thing. If they're not going to do it, you're okay with that. You're okay with creating the distance and setting the boundaries. And to me, that was really, really a milestone that I had hit with being okay with saying, you ain't right for me. You ain't the type of person that I want to keep in my life or give my loyalty to, because I shouldn't have to force yours when it comes to me. That was big for me. Instead of telling people what I didn't want them to do or trying to make sure that certain things weren't done, I learned to observe more, paid attention to their character and the choices that they wanted to make. And that helps create a lot of the space and the healing that I needed to be able to detach from those people. But this is the thing. Once you get to the phase of understanding that everybody is not meant to be in your life, you don't like their character, you don't want to force them to be loyal, you don't want to force them to treat you good, you're then going to have to go through the process of grieving the loss of them while they're still alive. And that's going to be very, very hard because you're going to miss their presence in your life. You're going to miss the good times. But you have to be strong enough to understand it's just not healthy for me. You know, the bad outweighs the good. And the heartache that comes with the disappointment from those people, sometimes it's not worth the good times. Yeah, you may have, some good memories and some good laughs, but it's better to go ahead and grieve the loss of them and let them go so that way you can move on. I feel like I was always chasing me out of everybody else. I always expected what I was giving to come back in return, and that led to a lot of disappointments. Like, my loyalty is unmatched. It's on a whole other level. If you were my friend, I was with you until the very end. Your tears were my tears. Your pain was my pain. Your problems were my problems. Somebody hurt you, they hurt me. And when I wouldn't get that in return, it would cut me really, really deep. Same with my relationship. And ultimately, I had to realize everybody's not wired the same. Everybody is not going to give you what you give them. So now you get to this crossroad where you have to decide, is everybody that you have around you, are they worthy of that version of you? Because if they're not, let them go. I had to really push myself to get to a point and realize that everybody's load isn't mine to carry. I didn't want no more unnecessary weight in my life. Actually, it wasn't even that I didn't want it. I couldn't handle it no more. I couldn't afford it. It was costing my peace of mind. And once I started to let that go, I started to create space to be able to work on me. See, healing is so hard because it's a constant battle between you and your inner child or your past trauma. For me, it was my inner child. I wanted that safety and that security. And so it became hard to detach. It became very hard to start fresh. Starting over again, no. It felt like it felt like I was losing everything all over again. And it took a very, very long time before I could understand that just because you still have something, it doesn't mean that it's good for you. And if it's not any good for you, the only way you're going to get to that real happiness and the things that are going to bring you joy is by just facing it head on, just dealing with it, going through the motions, detaching yourself, letting go, moving on, no matter how hard that is, no matter how dark it is. Sometimes life has a way of breaking you down in ways that you never saw coming. And not everything is meant to be put back the way it once was. Not everything is meant to be fixed. Sometimes it's about starting over with what you have left. And for me, I was left with a clear vision and a heart that, was very guarded. But it also made me able to appreciate when I had total opposite of what I was used to. One thing that healing really taught me and showed me was that connection and attachment are two totally different things. Just because you are attached to a person does not mean you are connected to them. Sometimes you are total opposite of that person and you won't even see it until, you no longer have them in your way, in your sight, in your immediate space. And you have to separate yourself in order to see those things. And for me, it was almost like I reflected back and I thought about so many people that I was attached to, but I had no real connection with them. You know, they didn't even see the depth of me. They didn't know how to communicate with me in a way that made me feel like I was whole. There is nothing more brutal than looking in the mirror one day and feeling lost, like you have completely lost yourself. You don't even know what makes you happy. You don't know what happened to the woman that, used to have certain dreams and wanted to do certain things. You got so accustomed to living a certain way and doing things according to routine that you forgot to take care of you. You forgot that you had goals and you're still a person outside of being a mother or a wife or a girlfriend. You have to have your own identity. You have to have your own purpose. And you have to continue to pursue that, and it's really hard to balance life sometimes. I trust me. If nobody else gets it, I know that it is very hard to balance things sometimes. I've always been the type of person that I overworked. So I would get real fixated on something if it was, a hustle that I was doing or building a business or trying to learn something. I would pour into that and I would get so consumed with that, now other areas in my life were being neglected. My marriage, my parenting. And I would always go back to those things, but I neglected it for a while. But the biggest thing of all that I neglected was myself, because while I was just trying to balance everything and not knowing how to do that, I stopped learning about me. And as you're growing, you should always be learning about that woman inside of you, figuring out what you want to do and how far you want to go. And one thing about a woman, sometimes we don't even know our own strength, but women are powerful. There's so many things that we can do when we actually focus and when we learn to put our mind to it. And that was one of my biggest problems is I started just taking care of everybody else, that myself was getting pushed farther and farther to the back of the line until one day I couldn't find her. And that's why the woman that I've become now, I am very, very big on keeping people around me that motivate me. I'm not saying that everybody is going to have that personality where they can spark your brain. But if you are not somebody that adds any type of value to my life in some sort of way, I really don't have time for you no more, because I think bigger now. I think a lot bigger and I'm all about chasing my dreams. And it could be on the smallest scale, but add something to my life. Don't just be a taker. Be a giver as well. I'm not talking about financially. You don't have to pay for nothing. You don't have to do anything, but let me just give you an example. Let's say you're somebody who loves cooking and you have a friend and she knows that you love cooking. So every time you cook, she comes over to get a plate of food. But she's never once told you should write a cookbook or you could sell plates, or do you need me to go to the grocery store? Anything. She's never done any of that. She just always comes over to eat. That's not somebody that I would invite to dinner, because you're just a taker. And I really shaped my surroundings according to that, because I feel like that's very, very important. And especially in relationships, I don't need someone to pay my bills and sweep me off my feet and take care of me. I need somebody that's going to motivate me to chase my dreams, to think bigger, to add that type of value to my life. Anything else, I got it. I can do it. I want somebody who has a mind like mine that will help me get farther. And like I said, I'm very, very big on that nowadays because that's the type of person that I am. And I understand that everybody doesn't have that personality, but if you can't add that, you better have some type of something that you can add to my life. Otherwise, I just really don't got time. So the bottom line is I wanted to discuss healing during this episode. After I did that event the other day, I realized there are so many women that are on this healing journey. And when you first begin that journey, you automatically think that it's going to come with this feeling of relief. And it doesn't. It actually gets worse before it gets better. And it's going to be very dark and very hard. And it's going to get depressing. And there's going to be moments where you feel like everything is falling apart. And then you're going to question whether you made the right decision. Did you handle it the right way? And it's going to feel like you didn't. But that is a part of the process. And it's like shedding your old self to become your new self. And sometimes you have to let those broken pieces be the broken pieces and leave them where they're at and rebuild with what you have. So that way you can be not just a better version of your old self, but a new version. And I promise you, trust me, and I've been in some of my darkest days during my healing journey. Once you get past that and go through that phase, because it is going to happen, that is a part of it. But once you get to the other side, it's a whole better feeling. It is a whole different world. It is a whole new you. And that's a wrap for today. But I'm going to leave you with this. Never forget it's not too late. Your past doesn't define who you are. It's not how you start, it's how you finish. So keep going. This ain't just a podcast, it's a movement. So be a part of it. Like, follow, share, and subscribe. I'm building a space for everybody out there trying to rebuild what life tried to destroy. Us. Thank you for tuning in to Queen C's Against All Odds podcast. I'll see you next week with more truth, more tea, and more transformation. I'm out, y'all.